And today's message, welcome everybody. It's great to see everybody. You guys look great. Today's message title is Getting the Gold for God. Okay, that's a reference to the Olympics, isn't it?
Pretty good.
Why? Why the Olympics? What's going on with the Olympics? Yeah, today's the last day of the Olympics. And it's kind of beautiful in a way. All the people of the world come together for this athletic competition, and it's not that many things that draw the world together. The Olympics is one of them. And getting the gold for God. What's that all about? Going for gold for God. Well, people have different motivations, don't they? And we see people, these champions, they go out there and they're the top in their field in the whole world. And you know, some of them they do it for the sake of their because they're really good at what they do, and they're very proud of what they've been able to accomplish in their lives. And then there are those who they share the credit with their coaches and their team and even their country who sponsors them. And then there's those who give credit to God. You know, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God. So motivation is something important. And I'm also going to be talking about divine principle today. And so I joined the Zoom meeting yesterday called Create a Life You Love. And Create a Life You Love is an introduction to divine principle. So if you've been in this church, many of you have been in this church not for years, but for decades. The introduction to divine principle is basic. It's so basic. We know we've studied divine principles so long. The introduction is just very basic, but I think it can be distilled down into one word. John, what might that word be?
Could be love. Could
Mark?
be unity.
Okay, love, unity. Mark.
Happiness.
That's it. It's happiness. The first sentence of the introduction to divine principle says, everyone wants to be happy. And depending on the life that we live, it either leads us to unhappiness or happiness. And it's largely a measure of, are we loved? And do we have someone whom we can love? Are we giving and taking love in our life? And that leads to happiness. And then who is the source of love? It's God. So depending on how much we have God in our lives, we can find happiness. And I think, hopefully all of us, we've sacrificed so much in our life. If that hasn't led us to happiness, then by God, try something different. So by now we should be able to love ourselves and love, the people around us, our friends and our family. Yesterday it was a good meeting. It was, as I said, it was very basic. There was around 26 people that joined the Zoom call, and Kelvin Thurston, who's a minister I respect a great deal in Southern Florida, he gave basically what was a PowerPoint about the introduction to the principle. And Alvin Navon was on there. Does anybody know Alvin? Carol Navon is a member who used to live I guess she still lives in the western part of the state. Unfortunately, she went through a divorce, and when she was doing so, Tim and Gail kind of came to her rescue, helped her out a bit, and they made a relationship with their son, Alvin. I think I got that right. Navon. And now he's of age, so he's interested in blessing. So Tim invited him to come to the introduction to principle, and I think he was interested in doing the next step. There was an afternoon lecture called, what's it called? Do you know, Stephanie? Not Create the Life You Love, but it's the next step. And it's a 3.5-hour introduction. It's not an introduction, it is the principle. It is divine principle. And Alvin simply said that I can't go today, but is there a recording? So he's game. And then one of the people on my breakout session, her name is Dr. Nelson, and she's in DC. And she said, she invited 20 people to come to the introduction to principle, but none of them came. She said, none of them came. And I just said, you know, there are people out there who are seeking. There are people out there who are searching. There are people out there who are unhappy with their lives the way it is. So keep trying, keep inviting, because we were in the same boat once upon a time. Because we're all searching for happiness, and so am I changing gears here? Recently, true parents are explaining that Jesus' essence is more important than Jesus' words. So when we study divine principle, when we study the Bible, true parents say the essence is more important than the words. What does that mean? You can take a quote from Jesus, and you could base an entire sermon on it. You could base an entire movement on it, I suppose. For example, Jesus said, "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me." Matthew 10:37. So, but we mustn't take the words out of context. And from my point of view, if we're trying to introduce someone to Jesus, that's not where you start. Because Jesus understood the importance of family. And when we look at the totality of Jesus' life, his sermons, his stories, his guidance, the way he lived his life, how he interacted with his disciples, then we find the model of a godly life. And the godly life is what we follow, not one sentence. True parents' words are also important. And more important, though, is the essence of true parents' life. We have everything. We have all these speeches and all these actions. We were with Father, many of us, for many years. So we have this whole thing, big picture that we can look at and we can understand what Father was saying. And he said a lot. And we've followed Father from the time he was young until he was in a wheelchair, didn't we? But how did we come to true parents in the first place? Divine principle is the gateway to come to true parents. And if we met the church and just read Father's speech, it would affect us. We could say, this is a great speech, or it's wise. But we wouldn't understand Father's place in history. We wouldn't understand him. He's the Messiah. He's the returning Lord. Except that we study divine principle. And the conclusion of the divine principle is that Father is the Messiah. He's the second advent. So if we, in our turn, are going to share this message of hope with others, we have to go through divine principle. Or it's best to go through divine principle. I think everybody here went through divine principle, right? To come to Father, if you're first gen. Maybe if you're second gen. Unfortunately, most of us, we're not experts on divine principle. We know some people that are very good, that are very knowledgeable about divine principle, that it's their passion to study it. I think many of us know Tyler Hendricks. Dr. Hendricks was here in the Triangle for a couple of years. And, he knows divine principle really well. If you came through the San Francisco area, Bay Area, as I did, you probably know Noah Ross. Noah Ross was a really expert speaker, lecturer, divine principle. But when the leader in the San Francisco area, Oni Durst, everybody knows Oni, right? Oni came from Korea. She came to San Francisco. She witnessed for a couple of years. There was no results. There were no members. And finally, she found one person. After 2 years, she found one person. And those two people, Oni and Christina, created this incredible witnessing powerhouse where many of us met the church and joined the church. It was quite a feat. quite an accomplishment. And she had two people she was considering for her main lecturers. And one was Noah Ross. And Stephanie, do you know David? I don't know his last name.
Stoller.
Stoller. And he was an architect. He was handsome, really good-looking guy, accomplished, successful. So he was a possibility for to become the lecturer. And Noah had a speech impediment. He was not the first choice. Welcome. Come on in and have a seat. But Noah studied divine principle intensely, and he overcame his stutter. And he became this incredible lecturer of divine principle. And then there's another person that's a really expert divine principle lecturer is Jerry Servito. And I first encountered Jerry when Stephanie organized, it was like a divine principle study session here at the church. It was, how long? A few years ago, wasn't it? 10 years ago? It was a while back. So we watched videos of Jerry Servito giving divine principle lecture. And Jerry made divine principle study a central focus of his life, and it was his personal passion. And I found a testimony from Jerry in the Golden Newsletter. Anybody read the Golden Newsletter? Nobody? You guys don't know about the Golden Newsletter? One person? If you want to get connected, there's some really good testimonies in it. And it's got other stuff. I mean, some people put recipes in it, whatever. But there was a really good testimony from Jerry Servito. So Jerry Servito calls divine principle God's story. And in his first workshop, I think he joined in New York. His first workshop, he listened to divine principle lectures 3 times a day, 3 hours a lecture. In California, I think most of the lectures were about an hour. And then we played volleyball, right? Or played dodgeball or something. But he was going to lectures 3 times a day, 3 hours a lecture, 3-day lecture, 3-day workshop, 7-day workshop, 21-day workshop, 40-day workshop. We love our workshops. And he just soaked it in, he wrote stuff down, and he wrote down the diagrams, and then finally he got to the 120-day workshop. Dear, you only went to 7? We're gonna have to find you a 40-day. In the 120-day workshop, he was trained to give divine principle lectures by Reverend Pseudo and by Reverend Kevin McCarthy, who's from North Carolina, by the way. Reverend Pseudo taught the students how to do napkin lectures. Napkin lecture is when you're trying to share the principle with someone, and you find yourself in a coffee shop, and there's nothing to write on, so you grab the closest thing, a napkin, and you start writing diagrams on the napkin, and you're explaining to someone, this is divine principle, God, and parents and children, a heavenly world comes from that. So he learned how to do the napkin lectures, and then he's less than a year in the church, and he was sent out pioneering, and that's where he said he really understood the principle, because he was on his own. He had to explain it to people. He had to amass so much information, and they took him out in a van. All the pioneers went out in vans with a blackboard and tapes, cassette tapes of Reverend Pseudo's lectures, and a baggage, a suitcase. And they went out, and I think it was, I forget how long they were out there, 20 days or 40 days or something. And so he learned divine principle, and then when he came back, he started to give, he joined the 21-day workshop, giving the lectures, and he just thrived on it. But there was so much material in his head. He was learning all this stuff. And there was so much. Were you with Jerry? Is it Jerry or Harry? Jerry, right? Were you with him, John, when you were in New York?
I know him, yeah, Jerry Sabito, yeah.
All right, Jerry. So there was so much stuff in his head that he says that it felt dry, and he says falling asleep became common. I assume he's talking about the students. I don't know. Maybe he fell asleep. I don't know. But he would be doing a 3-hour lecture and just, wishing for the time to be over. So it was excruciating at some point. And then after a few years, he stopped teaching divine principle. He gave it up. And he was so relieved. He was so glad it was over for a short time. But that didn't last too long because he felt like divine principle is so uplifting, he has to share it with others. And every week he was going to Belvedere and he was hearing Father's speech, and Father is so serious. This world is dying, and we have something to share which can help people, which people are looking for. They're looking for love. They're looking for happiness. They can't find it. But we found it, or if we haven't found it, then we can't witness it. But he felt like we found something that we need to share. And so he wanted to get back into it, so he attended seminary, he studied unification of thought, which lifted him up. And then he won first place in a divine principle workshop. Okay, he won the first place. So, yes, Jerry Servito got the gold medal. And Noah Ross takes home the silver. And the bronze medal, I guess, goes to John Hayes. And gradually his understanding of the principle changed from something intellectual to something more emotional. One day he visited Hyojin, and Hyojin had a lot of questions for him. Because he said, what do you think of me? What do you think of Father? What divine principle? And what do you think, how do you explain divine principle in a few words? And this is what Jerry said. He said, divine principle is a great epic saga. Epic means it's big, right? It's like historical. Saga means a story. Explaining how God's hopes, dreams, and everything he lived and longed for are lost in the tragedy of the fall. And God's efforts to pick up the broken pieces of his dream, his ideal, his heart, his hope. It was the first time he had actually verbalized his feelings about the principle. And it was what he heard one lecturer calling history, or his story, God's story. What is his story? True Father discovered the story of God's anguish at the fall, but also his joy at the creation. The broken parental heart of God because his children rebelled. And when True Father uncovered God's hidden pain, he cried so many tears that the floor of the church at Jangpadang warped. He couldn't stop crying, and he understood God's pain, losing everything. This was the same heart of God which led Jesus to climb up on the cross, and the same heart which brings us here today. We can't abandon God in his grief. Everybody connects to a different part of the principle. When I first heard it, I was really inspired by parallels of history. But spirit world, I didn't get it at all. Spirit world, I didn't get it. Anybody else have a favorite part of principle? Mark, what was your favorite part when you first heard the church?
Well, principle of creation, and also the parallels of history was phenomenal. It was very profound.
Remember?
Grace.
Grace?
Grace. Principle of creation.
Creation.
It's a fall.
In the fall. Karen?
Return and resurrection.
Returning resurrection.
Which
Probably. Yeah, did you have a favorite part of Divine Principle when you studied it? No, Jack?
Nothing specific.
No. Teresa? Chapter 2, it's very revealing. Yeah, but Christology, which was the part that affected me the most, because I wanted to believe in Jesus, and then I kind of had an experience with Jesus during the lecture, and it wasn't that Jesus, that comes on the clouds on a white horse. No, it was Jesus as a man of God, as the Messiah, a man who we want to be like. All right, to conclude, we are here today because we have shared God's joy and tasted the bitter sorrow that drives the restoration providence. We can no longer allow mankind to betray our Heavenly Father, His trust, or trample on our Heavenly Mother's love. God will never forget us, and He will always remember everything we do to find His lost children. Please join me for a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful this morning that we could look back at our own course of faith, look back at the course of our true parents in Jesus, realizing that the motivating force was the heart of love which we feel for you, the heart of compassion which we feel for mankind. We just want to act on that motivation to make our world a little better starting today. We pray these things, asking your grace and your love and your guidance. In the name of the Blessed Central Families, Jew. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I have a couple of announcements here. One is that I've been asked to remind everybody about the donation for Chunmoing-gong in Korea. There was a video I saw this morning of the mother visiting the Chunmoing-gong, and it's beautiful, right? It's amazing. So I think we all want to be a part of helping to construct that. It's the place where we can feel, physically feel God's manifestation on the earth. The next thing is, happy Holy Day, everybody. Today is the declaration day of God's eternal blessing and the realm of royal Sabbath, also known as 777. What's it called? Joel. 8 seconds, right? So, happy Holy Day, everybody. And we want to mention something about the Peace Road. So on Wednesday, okay, you want to do it?